Labor Organization, the research department, and as you can appreciate, we do a lot of work on the platform economy, but on broader issues around digitalization of the world of work. We are actually launching on the 25th of September a observatory at the ILO on these issues. So there will be not only discussions on platform economy, but also on algorithmic management, AI, and future work. So if you're interested, check it out. It will be released in 2 weeks' time from now. So something that probably is interesting for the rest of the crowd here as well. So, I mean, I don't have much to add in terms of the assessment of what Sabina already mentioned. I think there's a lot of things that she had already unpacked. Maybe just to repeat, I think one aspect that is really important to understand is the global nature of this phenomena and the interaction and the interrelation with these different things. So initially, obviously, when we saw these technologies emerging, the hope was that we create not only a globalization for goods, but also globalization for services, so that services could trade more easily across the world, and that was initially then, or mostly happening through platform, so international labor platforms. And I think that in a sense, the idea behind that approach is still valid. What happened in the meantime is that what these platforms essentially did is to break down what is a broader set of jobs into really small tasks that can be performed over the internet, whether it's delivery services, obviously, but also chat boxes and the possibility, for instance, to also do micro tasks such as image tagging, etc. So I think that there's a lot of different elements that needs to be appreciated. And the interesting thing, what Sabina highlighted already, is the fact that the exact same problem that we saw in the real economy and the physical world in terms of gender segregation and occupational segregation is happening again in the online world as well. So we see again women forced to select into certain occupation with less pay, maybe more also more volatile type of job opportunities or opportunities to take up some of these tasks. And I think that it's partly obviously related to the fact that there is a lot of discrimination going on in the real world. Work is gendered. Care work still remains mostly with women, despite the fact that, especially in advanced economies, there is some attempt to kind of shift that burden, but it simply is not happening. There is a lack of transparency in pay, which again for women disfavors particularly. And I think that all these things together will kind of replicate simply the burden that or the disadvantages that women face on the labor market, which is why the ILO has in its centenary declaration in 2019 called all member states to put in place policies and measures that ensure appropriate privacy and personal data protection and respond to these challenges, opportunities in the world of work related to the digital transformation of work, including platform work. And as a result, or as a follow-up to that call, we will have in our next International Labour Conference next year, we'll have an item on decent work in the platform economy. So having said that, to kind of answer maybe specifically your question on the policy angle to it, I think that the real challenge here in our sense is that there's a wide range of issues that are involved. The discrimination on the platform on international labor platforms is not only solved by policies directed to these platforms. There are wider issues in terms of where Sabina mentioned, like what access to transportation, access actually to digital tools, to the infrastructure that is needed. Not all countries will have the same access to infrastructure, and not all countries will allow access. As you know yourself, in some countries, internet connection is highly patchy and often disconnected for sometimes also political reasons. So you see that even if you want to kind of allow more access and better access is often hampered by other considerations. So you need this wider ecosystem. There's also an input and an important element that is related to the high concentration of digital platforms among advanced economies. So these big players that actually move into some of these countries to offer their services is an issue in itself. I mean, obviously, some countries like China have developed their own platforms, but that is only very few countries who have the capacity to do so. And the question then is, how do we actually access, how do you break up these monopolies so that that we have a wider, more dynamic, competitive system where women would have a better chance also to perform. So all this to say that the challenges are huge. The problem is the same as we had, as Sabina mentioned before, but the issue is that now we actually face a wider range of policy institutions that we need to bring on board in order to solve this issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Eckhart. That was a lot of information in a very brief amount of time. I'm very impressed at how succinctly you were able to present that for us. And I think it leads on quite well to the next question that I want to pose to both Hilda and Perna. And that was this sort of comment you made about this being sort of a wider ecosystem, and that the problem is the same as before. So we still are facing sort of the same issues that we were encountering decades before. It's maybe mutated a bit with this sort of digitalized side of it, but the issues are still the same. And one key issue that both Sabina and Eckhart have mentioned is that of the care burden. The fact that women, despite being active on labour markets, still have to carry the care burden and have then a sort of a double work burden for them to carry. And so I would like to understand, how are we seeing this being played out on digital labour platforms? And are there any sort of particular solutions or strategies that we are seeing that are particularly relevant to the platform economy? Are there ways that platforms are responding? Are there ways that communities are responding? Are there ways that state institutions are responding to overcome this sort of care burden? Maybe I will pass that first over to Hilda.
Yes, thank you very much for this. What Sabine and Anna said, it really resonates with what is happening here in most of African countries. I've been working before with Fair Work for almost 3 years, and we're trying to look at this working environment among platform workers. And when you look, we are trying to look on women's involvement or participation. And it's true that the care burden is really a challenge, especially in the African environment. You can understand where even from the physical work, you'll find that fewer women are involved in the labor market. And from the research we conducted, we also realized that women who are working on the platforms, they are more likely older compared to men when it comes to age. This means most of them have passed that childbearing age at least, which speaks a bit on the care burden. So most women who are working at least will have kids who are 10 years plus at least, but also they have higher level of education compared to men. So that also speaks on the confidence. How can you participate in the digital labor market? But what we have seen like happening when you look at this representation, like workers' organizations, the solution in some African countries, will find women, they have been the one that are championing this representation, like social groups where they're championing for women or gig workers' rights. So that's one way they are trying to present their challenges, and these have been helpful, at least to help at least policymakers understand what is happening in terms of gig working, but also what's happening to women. But also what we have start to see specifically in Tanzania, we have started to see there is a push on provision of childcare support, which of course platforms, they don't accept, but at least there have been a push on that. And there have also been a push on social protection benefits. So currently, at least we have 2 platforms that do offer social protection benefits. It's a bit tricky on the arrangement, but at least we have seen that have started to happen. But another challenge that we are facing in not only in East Africa, but in most African countries, as Eckhart said, we have this platform companies that are coming from, most of the time, from the north, coming to the south. And the challenge is most of our countries, they are not ready. They don't even know or understand, our policymakers, what is this. So basically, we don't have proper policies in place, like minimum wage already. It's not set like in most developed countries. And our policymakers, they don't even understand what's really going on. So the one who carries the pain is the worker. So currently what we have started to do when I was working with Fair Work was to train policymakers, first of all, to understand this market, because before they regulate, before they come up with policy to protect these workers, they need first to understand. So we have seen that move in a few African countries. They have been training to policymakers, at least first to understand, then to encourage them now to take a step and to ensure there is protection. And last but not least, we have also start to see, or at least there is a push to encourage these platforms to have women on their decision-making roles. We think this is important because at least these women probably, they will understand what other women are facing. And also, we are also trying to push that if the platform is in Tanzania, we should have someone from Tanzania, from Africa, who also understand the cultural and the social burden that a woman, or a Tanzanian woman, or an African woman have. We think that is also very important. But there is a lot still to be done to support our government, but to support the whole policy formulation, so as to support women in their platform work. Thank you. Over to you, Miriam.
Yeah, Hilda, thank you for this great sort of I guess summary of the different kind of solutions, and it really sort of works, I think demonstrates what we're hearing again, time again, is that many of the challenges are simply societal challenges, childcare support, social protection benefits, simply to improve the status and the access, the rights and representation of women, generally speaking, should be the goal, and not specifically targeted only at the platform economy, but raising the ability for women to interact overall on the labor market, and generally speaking in society, will then also improve their experience on the platform economy as well. Prerna, I'd be curious to hear how you then reflect on some of the challenges and the responses that Hilda is finding, and what you've sort of come across in your research.
Sure. Thanks a lot, Miriam. Thank you for having me on this webinar today. I think to start with, I would just like to echo what all the speakers have already said. Like you summarized, a lot of the challenges that we see with respect to women's participation in the economy are reflective of the challenges that exist in the larger labor market and society at large. And, we definitely see that play out in India and in South Asia, where women's labor force participation is already very, very low. It's amongst the lowest in the world. In India, I think, according to the latest numbers, we have about 35% of women participating in the labor market. And, while there are various challenges, various reasons why these numbers are so low, a lot of the issues that we have counted, like, lack of access to safe transport, lack of access to childcare, lack of social protection, and lack of good job opportunities, all contribute to the low participation of women. And that is what translates into, how and what women participate in the platform economy as well. And I think the other thing that would be really important to mention out here is also the gender digital divide that exists, especially in Global South. In Asia, only 42%, in South Asia, only 42% of the women own a smartphone, and only 31% use mobile internet. And the biggest barrier that women face in accessing or using mobile internet across South Asia is literacy and digital skills, which further compounds and becomes a challenge in ensuring gender equity in the platform economy. However, when we do have women participating in the platform economy, like you rightly mentioned, there is the additional care work burden that women have to deal with. And, with the platform economy, now that women have the option of working from home, they have a triple burden of managing domestic chores, of managing care work, and on top of that, participating in income generation activities, since that can be done from home now. But that really, it increases the burden that they have to deal with and the challenges that they face with respect to job quality, the jobs that we find women engaging in platform work in South Asia, be that online or location-based platform work, like Sabina mentioned earlier, are highly feminized, have lower wages compared to the kind of jobs that men engage with, and are more unstable and precarious in nature. So a lot of times we find women, choosing not to engage in platform work because it does not provide them with any stable income or any kind of job security or any kind of, social protection mechanisms to withstand the ups and downs that they face.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Maybe could we just keep our microphones on mute? Thank you. Perna, please continue.
In terms of policy measures to deal with this triple burden that women face, again, I don't have specific examples from the platform economy in particular, but I think larger policy measures that we're seeing in India include ensuring access to affordable childcare for women across all spectrums of the, all socioeconomic spectrums, ensuring that they have, access to transport, be that in the form of a private vehicle or in the form of public transport that is safe as well as affordable. And all of these measures apply in equal part to the platform economy as they do to offline work.
Thank you, Perna. And yeah, it's very sort of reassuring to see that sort of we are all aligned in terms of what the sort of core solutions are that we need to focus on. There's one that was mentioned by Hilda, and I'd be curious to sort of open this question to the entire panel, because this is something that I continue to also encounter in my work, is that we are seeing the real role of social groups, worker organizations, mentorship groups, communities, whether these be informal, simply formed due to locality, or whether these be more formally organized. Perhaps maybe they're also through WhatsApp groups that are developing out of the platforms. These different kind of community nodes are particularly helpful for women to overcome burdens because they provide a safe space. They provide a space for them to share knowledge, for them to learn, for them to sort of understand how to navigate this economy. And my question now, because this is a policy sort of roundtable and we're really discussing solutions, is how does a policy go about promoting more of these kind of collective organizations and these collective responses? What can policymakers do? Because Hilda, you mentioned it, maybe I'll throw it over to you, but I would love to hear, Perna, Eckhart, Sabina, I put you on the spot, but I'd love to hear maybe what you think policymakers could do to really encourage these approaches. But Hilda, maybe first to you.
Yes. Thank you very much. That is very common. So like WhatsApp groups from during our past research, what we realized, and most of this WhatsApp group were organized by women. And usually because of safety concerns, they would usually share details on WhatsApp. If it's late night, like I'm taking this trip, and they'll just broadcast to the group. So in case anything happens, at least someone who will be aware can support. But also they use this for child support at times. Sometimes they're busy, so they can just share in the group, kindly, can someone help me pick my kids from school? So this is how they're using this for social supports. But okay, when it comes to formal workers' organization, for instance, in Tanzania, there is a worker organization, the online, it's called TODA, Tanzania Online Drivers Association, and they are registered, and currently they have been having several discussions even with the Ministry of Labor and Ministry of Transport. So in case of any issues, they have been registered so they can speak on behalf of all workers, and there are some policy changes that have been pushed forward based on this interaction between these groups, this workers association, and the specific ministries and agencies. So at least that this is what is happening, and I know it's the same in Kenya and Uganda.
Thank you, Hilda. Prerna, I see you have your hand up.
Yes. Yeah, I just feel like if we're talking about worker groups and collectivization, I can't not but mention the policy vacuum that exists in terms of how platform workers are classified, which is one of the key barriers that exists to platform workers, either women or men collectivizing. And I think from a policy perspective, addressing that vacuum, are workers classified as independent workers? Are they employees? And having that clarification is one of the first steps we need to actually effectively enable workers to collectivize, to encourage dialogue, and to encourage raising concerns with platforms in a unified manner. Yeah, just wanted to put that out.
Then I might leave it at that before we jump to the next question, but it's a question that really occupies my mind. So anyone in the chat, I'm curious to kind of hear how do you go about facilitating workers or women to form a community, whether it's on this sort of formal level or whether it's on a very informal level. Please put it in the chat, because I'm curious to hear how we as policy practitioners sort of go about enabling that. Sabina, I see you have your hand up though. Please jump in.
Yeah, thanks, Miriam. I just wanted to make 2 quick points. One is with respect to the vacuum in policy making when it comes to women, right? And women in the platform economy. So on the one hand, to improve female labor force participation, it is widely believed that women need more flexibility because they have to balance income generation with domestic responsibilities. Women themselves will tell you that they want more flexibility. So there's a tendency to kind of push, working from home for women, and for women to self-select into working from home. Now, when you survey the legislation, either proposed or passed legislation around gig work across the globe, what you find is that most of that legislation only speaks to women, or work, not just women, but work in location-based occupations within the platform economy, and not the web-based, which is the work from home category, right? And that is a huge gap, because presumably women value and need and are more represented in this kind of work from home scenarios. And once again, that is the group that is being left out of how do we legislate. Now, it's harder to legislate because it's, cross judicial boundaries within countries and internationally. So that's a huge gap. And, if we say that, no, well, we're going to legislate for the location-based first and worry about the online later, once again, we fall into that trap of not taking women's considerations and where they're located into account proactively in legislation. That's one point. And the second point with to your question about collectivizing, I think that's fundamentally important, because there is a disempowerment of workers that's taking place, right? When you have disaggregated self-employed workers as opposed to the factory model where workers were physically in the same location where it was easier to collectivize. This leads us to look at new forms of collectivization, and we're seeing examples of that using social media. And I also think there needs to be a legal movement to legitimize this form of collectivization. Those are the 2 points I wanted to make. Thank you.
Eka, please chime in.
Yeah, no, I just want to do on that last point on collectivization. I wanted to maybe add something to what the previous speaker was just mentioning. I mean, yes, it's true that, because of the servicification of economies, there's a long-standing trend towards decollectivization. I think that we have seen that in advanced economies very dramatically, and obviously in developing countries, there was never really a movement to collective representation, with some exceptions. I would be very careful to legislate this, in a sense that, I mean, here I'm talking mostly of the experience also that we've seen in transition economies in in Eastern Europe, is as soon as the state comes in, these organizations lose legitimacy. I mean, it's impossible to kind of have the state organizing workers on their behalf. I think what needs to be done, and this is something that comes back to what my earlier points, is that there needs to be a privacy, there needs to be a way of communicating among workers that it can be done without interference from external sources, so whether it's the state or employers, etc. So I think there needs to be a possibility to do that. That is not always a given, and I think that that's an important point to mention, that often you have even like social media obviously are open to manipulation, open to interference, etc. And I think that it's an important element to that, to provide that infrastructure. One possibility, and this is, I mean, with a big question mark, I would say, one possibility is to follow a bit like the Scandinavian model, which is to say that we combine social security provisions, that there are some movements obviously to also provide social security for platform workers, with letting this social security system be managed by collective representations, like it is called the Ghent model, according to following the Belgium city Ghent. But the idea is really that it is not a state provision. It's being managed and run by collective, by trade unions essentially. I would still put a large question mark behind that, because it's not sure that this can be done easily or transplanted from Scandinavia to other countries. But I would see that's one possibility for me, where I say that you can maybe stimulate collectivization by offering complementary services through, for instance, social security for these workers to collectivize.
Yeah, thank you, Eckhart. I think this is really the kind of goal of this webinar today, was to discuss different solutions. What is happening? Our economy is changing, the structures are changing, and what kind of policy responses can we have, and what can be replicated? And for all of us kind of in this discussion now to take this back and sort of analyze, how does this affect our work, and what kind of different solutions can we consider? I'm very aware of the time, and the one sort of point that I wanted to really jump to and ask all of the guests today was now sort of looking to the future. And I think that any discussion on the digital economy today really is not complete without discussing then the role of AI and how these technologies and this industry as a whole will sort of affect these gender disparities. And I think Perna already mentioned, that only sort of 40% of women in South Asia have access to a smartphone, whilst at the same time we are seeing sort of many countries really pushing the AI revolution, its potential for job creation. I know that in Kenya, for example, in Rwanda, they are really sort of pushing for data annotation contracts, and sort of what role this AI revolution could mean for the growth of the economy. So I would sort of like to ask all of my speakers, maybe I could even start with Perna, how do we ensure, though, that this AI revolution does not continue to replicate and exacerbate the existing inequalities that we have already just sort of discussed, this past 40 minutes? How do we ensure that this sort of new AI revolution doesn't exacerbate those inequalities, but actually sort of can be used to overcome them and be this maybe sort of economic potential that we are seeing a lot of policymakers promote? Perna, I'll pass it first to you.
Thanks, Maria. I think the one thing that I would like to start with here is by addressing to make use of this AI revolution and ensure that it doesn't exacerbate existing inequalities. we need to start by addressing inequalities that exist with respect to education and skill development across genders, especially in the global South. I just saw a very interesting figure about rural, urban, and gender gaps in basic digital skills. In basic digital skills like being able to access a file on a computer or being able to use the copy-paste function on a document, which I think we take for granted. And there are significantly lower proportion of youth between the ages of 15 to 29 that are able to do. The gender gap in that age bracket is significant. And if we really want to make use of the AI revolution, I think we need to go back to the basics of really looking at how our education and how our skilling infrastructures are organized and how we are training the youth in our countries, how we are incentivizing the participation of young women in STEM fields. And I think that is the foundation on which we really need to build upon this opportunity.
Thank you, Perna. Hilda, do you have a comment on this?
Yeah. Thank you very much. Just an addition to what Perna said, so bridging the gender digital divide is very important. And when I talk about that, I mean access to device. So most women have lower economic power or muscle, so sometimes the smartphones are a bit expensive, so make sure that women do have access to device. But also when it comes to internet adoption and usage, is a bit low to women compared to men. So ensuring that at least women have access to device, but access to internet. But I think one major issue, which also Perna touched, is on the skills. And when I talk about skills, I mean both basic skills and advanced skills. So basic skills is very important because that will help popular majority to have access to internet or to start using, but also we need people with advanced digital skills so that they can take part on AI, on the algorithms, on the development. So we need people who can relate and who can take part on AI with advanced digital skills. But last but not least, I think also we need to look on this enabling environment like digital public infrastructure. Like we should make sure that the whole of it supports women. For instance, it's digital ID. We talk about digital payments. We talk about data access. So everything should work together to ensure that women are not left behind. So whatever systems that we are developing, we should make sure that women can have access to it. And then that will, at the end, we should make sure also these AI policies or strategies, they have at least a portion, or they are considering women or vulnerable communities. Thanks.
Maybe I'll pass it then to Eckhart. Your thoughts on this?
Yeah, no, thank you. I wanted to make a bit of self-promotion here because we have been working quite a bit on this issue and the kind of what the future will offer us. And one point that I always insist on is what I call the AI trilemma, which is basically to say that the current way of how we develop this technology is unsustainable, both ecologically and socially, and will not deliver any benefits in terms of productivity gains. And so what we really have to do is rethink the entire paradigm under which we develop these technologies, and that requires quite a bit of policy intervention. So skills was already mentioned. I will not repeat that. I think it's a given almost that we need to obviously provide skills, and that's foundational also, especially for female empowerment. I think that women still to this date have not only face discrimination in terms of the labor market, but they face already discrimination at the educational system. I mean, and you don't have to go to Afghanistan to kind of make that point. I think there are other countries where similar problems exist. The second point was also mentioned already, which is kind of giving these people a voice, helping them to collectivize. I think that's certainly an important way forward, and some of the suggestions are already given. But I think there are two more elements to it, and one is which we haven't really talked much about is income support, income insurance, if you want. So social security, broadly speaking, is obviously hugely lacking in most countries of this world. So I think that finding ways of providing social security to especially to people on the platform will also kind of help maybe to shift that paradigm towards a stronger more worker focused development of this technology. And then I think a last point which I always try to insist on, which is to say that we actually need to also use these technologies for improved policy delivery. There are a lot of good examples already out there. I mean, when we talk about training for skills, for instance, digital training tools exist. They need to be used much more effectively than that they're currently being used. Micro credentials is another one. This is actually a very important element to this entire digital transition. Career orientation. There are examples in Singapore, for instance, where the policymakers are providing career orientation over the entire life cycle, not only at the beginning when you enter work, but through the entire life cycle. So reorientation over your life cycle, etc., which is an important element. And there's certainly, if there's a more gender lens to it, can also help women. And then obviously, and I think very importantly for a lot of countries, is better enforcement of labor standards and labor inspection due to or with the help of digital tools. So there are countries who are already doing this, and I think that kind of maybe extracting best practices for this would be very helpful. So using these tools for policy delivery is an important element to shift the focus away from some of the biases, discrimination, market concentration that we are currently seeing towards socially beneficial use on development of these policies. So I will share my one of the articles I've written in the chat, and I'm happy to take more questions afterwards if you're interested.
Thank you for those great insights, Eckhart. I will then pass this word then also on to Sabine to follow up. Oh, I see you are on mute, Sabine.
Yeah, I mean, Miriam, I think given the consideration of time, I don't have that much more to add to what the speakers have already said at this point. Yeah.
Thank you. Well, then, yeah, I kind of really appreciated this sort of final word from Eckhart, because it's important that whilst there are so many challenges out there, there are also many great potentials that are sort of developing. We are seeing the way that digital tools can also be applied to overcome biases, the way that digital tools can sort of provide access for women, and the way that we can sort of harness the changes that we are seeing to overcome the structural challenges that we are facing. And I would sort of use this last opportunity to open the discussion for any questions that any of our guests might have, whilst we have these panelists here before us to sort of utilize their expertise. Please put your sort of questions in the chat, and I'll give us sort of a minute or two for any shy faces to come forward. But I would also like to sort of close off this session by bringing up the issue that I think was raised by all sort of guests, and that was the role of social protection and sort of access to social benefits, and the different sort of models that are being tried and tested around the world, whether it be through sort of a typical state provision, whether it be through a sort of third-party body, whether it be via a platform, whether it be sort of through a private institution. There are many different sort of models that are being tested with social protection, and this is something that the GIZ Gig Economy Initiative is really kind of wanting to research more on. We're hoping to host a webinar series later this year to explore what sort of are the potentials and challenges in providing social protection. And I believe that social protection, a stronger access, is certainly a way to overcome some of these gender disparities that we see in the gig economy. So keep your eyes and ears peeled because we will be presenting on that topic as well. Now I'm just checking the chat. I see that Eckhart has very kindly posted his article in there, but I don't see any questions. So I would say that we are very punctual and on time, which always pleases me in these webinar sessions. I would thank everyone for their insights. I really think that we got some very interesting sound bites coming from there and some really interesting policy nodes that I think is something that we can work from. So I would simply say thank you very much to all of my experts for attending. I really enjoyed it, and my desk is covered with scribbled on notes that I will follow up now. So thank you all for attending, and I would wish you a pleasant afternoon and evening. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Hi. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.